Hello and welcome back to yet more Darren Shan book reviews. So, by the time this comes out in August, it will have been, keeping up with the standard monthly review upload, except for June, obviously. Um, in between, filming for the books review for 789, I've actually gone to meet Darren Chan himself. Well, as of filming this, I'm actually filming this on the 1st of May. So that is 15 days away from me, which I'm super excited for. Because by the time this video comes out, these three books, plus all the other books in the series, and the Saga of Larrington Crapsley, will be signed by the author. I'm super excited about that. There will have been a video for that back in May. So it's a good ways back in terms of uploads. So it's actually been a little while since I finished my read through of the Saga of Darren Shan. How far away has it been? Well, I'm at the last book of the Saga of Larrington Crapsley. That's how quickly I read. On average, I say for smaller books in around the 200 to 250 page range, I read about 100, roughly about 80 to 100 pages per day. That's how quickly I read. So, for those who don't know about what books I am going to be reviewing, it is The Lake of Souls, Book 10, Lord of the Shadows, Book 11, and lastly, the end of the series, Sons of Destiny, Book number 12. Now, getting into the swing of things here for The Lake of Souls. This book is the most out there in the franchise, and Darren himself have even said this on numerous occasions, even in his author's notes about this, because on the website for the vast majority of his books, except for maybe the Archibald Locke series, he has, if you go to see what books he has on his website, what he's published, you can scroll down to read the author's notes. So he'll talk about the a bit of the development, the thought process that he had when it was released, and I think it was around Vampire Prince was when the vampire book started to take off. Within Ireland, it took off like it's massive in Japan. The series is colossal in Japan, which is why there is the manga based off of it. But this book is kind of filler in a sense. It is and it isn't. Because there are a lot of important parts in it, but it's a book that not a lot of people like. Because it's more sci-fi-y than pure fantasy, more than the way it is with continuing on with the War of the Scars. Because at the beginning of the book takes place literally right after Crepsley's death, where as they're leaving the Cave of Retribution, they run into Lady Ivana. And Lady Ivana, of course, reveals that she knew of Larrington's death, and that even though she doesn't appear to be upset, she has spent many decades mourning his death before it even happened, because again, she is Mr. Tiny's daughter, so she has the clairvoyancy ability there. So she obviously seen it, and we do know about that from the Saga of Larrington Crapsley and Brothers to the Death. We do get a hint of that, the fact that she knew the path that Larrington ended up going down led him to the Cave of Retribution from Killers of the Dawn. Eventually, Darren and Harket go back to the Cirque du Freak. We also learn that they have used two of the last remaining chances to kill the Lord of the Vampanese, which at the end of the last book we learned was Steve Leonard or Steve Leopard. So those two chances, obviously, was when one of them was when Crepsley was fighting the fake Lord of the Vampanese and Steve, but the other time was just prior to them being captured by the police. Had they killed Steve then, that would have been it, because they were going to kill Steve, but then they're like, no, hold on, that's not, because if we kill Steve and the police find out about that, they're not going to be too kind about that. So we have one fabled encounter left with Steve Leopard. And so over time, Darren is still not necessarily grieving, but he's dead on the inside and on the outside. Essentially, he doesn't talk about Mr. Crepsley. Harkett and Mr. Tall try to get him to talk about it. He spends some time with Evra's kids, Shankus, and the like. And But eventually, it's when Turska brings him in to show him the old pirate costume from when he was, when he first joined the Cirque du Freak. Sorry, I had to pause there because I thought I was going to sneeze. And he really looks into the mirror. He sees just how dead his eyes are, and that's what breaks the dam. He finally cries over the death of Mr. Crepsley, his would-be father figure for the past 15 odd years or so. Since he was blooded when he was, it's never really stated what age he is, but from conversations in Sons of Destiny, we can gather that Darren might have been about 12, 13 when he got blooded, when Crepsley blooded him. Then Harkett is back to having his nightmares again. And so eventually, Mr. Tiny does show up to offer Harkett. He says if he does not go with Mr. Tiny to learn of who he was, he will become a shriveling, screaming wreck and will perish. So he does. Darren wants to tag along with him, but Harkett vetoes that and he will not allow it. And that is also when Alice Burgess and Debbie Hemlock show back up. Because after them going back to their normal lives, they realize that they just couldn't. So Alice quits the police force, and then Debbie quits being a teacher. So then they come up with an idea of let's go to Vampire Mountain, because the Vampanese have their vampets, these humans that they use to kill vampires. Vampires will never use those weapons that the vampets are able to use because they are not blooded. So why don't they come up with their own task force? And so they were going to head over to Vampire Mountain. Darren was going to escort them. It was about time that he went back. I kind of wish he had at some point in these next 3 books, because I would have loved to have known what Seb Nile would have had to say at the passing of Larrington Crepsley. Because after Hunters of the Dusk, we do not see him whatsoever. So we don't know exactly what Larrington would have said, how he would have acted at the news of the death of his second assistant, because we know in the Saga of Larrington Crepsley he had another assistant of Wester Fleck. But if I decide to review the Saga of Larrington Crepsley, I'll of course get into that. And so they travel. They get directions of where they need to go. They need to take out. So it's this weird place that not many things make sense to him. Harkett is actually able to breathe normally. Darren can't. He needs the Harkett's mask to filter out some things. And so they have many different tasks that they go through. Finding and killing a Black Panther, which gives a map of where they're to head next. They also, Mr. Tiny threw in a little extra detail. So on the teeth of the panther, if once removed, there's letters on each of them, and that spells out Harkett moles. And there's supposed to be a little clue as to how and what who Harkett was in those. But they just can't figure it out. So they go to this place with big massive toads. They need the gelatinous globes from these very poisonous toads, which is eerily similar to Ivana's toads. Speaking of Lady Ivana, she shows up because she also plays a little bit of a part in this, but she does not tell them where they are. She does not speak of the War of the Scars or anything like that. She just brings them to where they need to go next day and build a raft. They tell her who they need to, vaguely tell her who they need to meet, someone with a fishing net, so that way they can fish Harkett's soul out of the Lake of Souls. And so they eventually they run into dragons. Yeah, dragons are in this series. That's something that Harkett had seen in some of his nightmares. He refers to Mr. Tiny as the Dragon Master in Hunters of the Dusk. And in Hundreds of the Dusk, when Ivana helps Darren to alleviate some of the nightmares that Harka is having, turns out that Darren has somewhat control of the dragons, and that show rears its head here. So that is a mystery that does not get explained until the last book. And so they run into the person with the fishing net. His name is Abrams, or Adams or Abrams. It's, I don't know. I'm dyslexic. But anyway, he's an old pirate, and he's been drinking a lot of poutine from using potatoes. He keeps an eye out for, he's been told by Mr. Tiny to stay there to wait for these two to give him his wildest dreams. He wants to go back to the 1930s where he's from. He also talks about how people wronged him or that. And their next objective is to go to the Temple of the Grotesque to grab the holy liquid. And once they get there, they realize that this thing really is grotesque. It's described as a giant snake-like creature, the face of a baby, and a bunch of hands on its body, and these people that worship it. So they sacrifice a kid or teenager for it. And so it also is shown that of the holy liquid that is kind of being defanged like a snake. I'm just realizing I forgot to put my phone on charge here, so I'm going to do that now. So because I have a few videos to film, and so they get the holy liquid, and then they eventually make it to the Lake of Souls, and that is where the dragons are resting. And so they use one of the teeth from the panther, because it's hollowed out and with a little hole in it. So they stick it into the gelatinous globes with the holy water. They use that and they make it to the Lake of Souls. And that's when it's revealed that Spitz Abrams is a cannibal. So he's going to use the Lake of Souls to constantly eat, because there's also a protection field around the Lake of Souls. So once you're within a certain amount of radius of the Lake of Souls, the dragons will not target you. And so eventually, Harka pulls out his soul, and it's none other than Kurta Smolt. Now, I knew of this going into it because, again, as I mentioned in the 2 or 3 other videos, I read this book series out of order. So I obviously knew Kurta was Harka from reading Sons of Destiny. Because I read Sons of Destiny way before I got to these 2 books. 15 years ago, to be precise. That's exactly the last when I started getting into 2009, 2010 was when I got into it. So actually, about 15, 16 years ago. Anyway, back to the whole point. So Harka accepts himself. They go back and they keep discussing of when they are. And Harka has the theory that maybe that's actually where they was the future. Specifically, a future where Steve wins and the Vampanese win the War of the Scars. And then the book ends. So yeah, it's not a great book. Every time I go to reread it, I always have the same thought process of, it's not that bad of a book. But then as the months and the years go by from me not reading it, and then I realize, then I completely forget about that revelation, and I'm like, oh yeah, no, Lake of Souls is probably the weakest book out of the 12. Because initially, as Darren was writing these, it was going to be 18 books. But he then, once he was writing Sons of Destiny, which I believe was going to be called Cannibal King, instead, book 11 was going to be called Sons of Destiny, he realized, like, oh no, this is definitely where I want to end this series. It started to reveal itself as he was writing it, type of way. And so that's what he done. Because initially, had I gone for the 18-book series, we would have explored more of this reality. So because we didn't get a chance to do that, that's why Lake of Souls is kind of the weaker one in the trilogy. Perhaps Darren will eventually get around to exploring that time when if a Lord of the Shadows appear. Speaking of Lord of the Shadows, that's the next book that I have to talk about. So book 11. This, as I said, this was originally going to be called Sons of Destiny. This is where the events of Sons of Destiny was going to play out a good bit in this book. And so he obviously had to scrap all of that. So Darren is going home. He's going back to his home city, because this is where the fabled final encounter with the Lord of the Vampires is going to happen. Darren and Harkat are still traveling with the Cirque du Freak. Darren is a bit hesitant to leave where the Cirque is staying because, again, this is his hometown. It may have been 18 to 20 years since he was last here. I know everyone still thinks that he is dead, but yeah, that's eventually he does go out. He learns that his sister has a child. That his parents no longer live in the house, but where he grew up, but Annie does with her son. He sees Annie at one point, and just as he's about to go up to her, he changes his mind and leaves. And then he also learns that one of his best friends, Tommy, is a really good goalkeeper. And a very famous goalkeeper. So Tommy Jones is the character's name, and so he goes by Tom Jones now, which of course is the famous singer. So that kind of gets roped into this as well. And so eventually, Darren accidentally meets Tom, who still thinks that Darren is dead, and so he has to come up with an excuse. He goes to the game, and that is when RV and Morgan James shows up, kills Tom. And then he has an encounter with Steve, Gannon, RV, Morgan, and a kid that was scoping around the Cirque du Freak, who Darren gave a ticket to, of the name of Darius, who turns out to be Steve's son. Yeah, Steve's been fucking, and he has his own kid. And so Darren gets shot. He gets found by some tramps, or homeless people, and it turns out that these homeless people are part of an organization known as Vampirates, set up by Darren's ex-girlfriend and the ex-police officer of Alice Burgess. They revealed that they had made it to Vampire Mountain. They were in front of the princes. Both Seba, Niall, and Vansha vouched for them to set this up. So that is literally the only time that the old quartermaster gets mentioned since book 7. And so they set it up because, with all the mass blooding that the vampires are doing, they're obviously going to be kind of careful about who they drink from. But who's the one group of people that no one will miss? The homeless. So that's who they've been targeting. They've been blooding. And these homeless know, because homeless people have their own little network type of situation. Now think back to BBC's Sherlock, how Sherlock used the homeless network. And again, this is where we're going to have the final showdown, but not yet. It does not happen. Eventually, they all go to talk to Mr. Tall to see what he can tell them of the events of the future. He tells them that yes, this is the fabled final encounter. He says that Vansha, regardless of if Darren kills Steve or Steve kills Darren, Vansha is going to die no matter what. He will be killed. Which does not take the old scruffy vampire too well. But then there's an attack happening where Shankus gets kidnapped and Hibernius Tall is killed by Morgan James. And that is also when it's revealed that the fabled lost brother of Ivana and the son of Desmond Tiny is actually Hibernius Tall. And so they go chasing for him, and Darren Harkat kills Morgan, and just before Darren kills Darius, because he feels this burning passion in him. He's literally about to kill him. Debbie tries to talk him out of it. He's not about to. And then Harkat is the one who convinces him that we can trade him for Shankus' his life. So they go to the old abandoned theater, the exact theater where the Cirque du Freak met, where they 18 to 20 years previously, has been transformed into a little stage for Steve. And they go to attempt to make a trade for Darius for Shankus, but Steve, being the estranged lunatic that he is, breaks Shankus' neck. But prior to all of that, Darren has a conversation with Lady Ivana, because Lady Ivana is following them. And she's the one who tells him that no matter what, if he kills Steve, he will be destined to become the Lord of the Shadows and bring an end to humanity. Whereas if Steve wins, the same thing happens. Steve becomes the Lord of the Shadows and brings an end. And Darren's wrestling with that. He is wrestling with that inner, that inner fear of, I don't want to be this Lord of the Shadows. And he has an option to escape. He could leave, turn his back, and then Steve becomes the Lord of the Shadows. But he doesn't want to do that because, again, he spends so much time with the vampires. He knows that he should put the clan before his own self, even as a vampire prince. So he's about to kill Darius when Darius reveals that his mother is Darren's sister. So yeah, that's how the book ends. So I like this book. It's basically part one of two to the overall story. The fabled final battle has not happened yet, and will not until, of course, we get to Sons of Destiny. But initially, it was going to happen in this book, because again, as I said, it was not going to be called Lord of the Shadows. But I like it. I definitely, again, I knew of Shankus's death because I read Sons of Destiny prior to reading that. So I knew again of the vampires and all of that. And I knew that Darius was Darren's nephew and all of that. So I knew of that. And then I think it's also mentioned of Mr. Tall's death in this. I cannot remember. So again, it's been a while. So now we do get on to the last book here, Sons of Destiny. Now, the end of the series. Does it end on a high? Does Darren become the fabled Lord of the Shadows? Well, it's time to answer all those questions. So we pick back up again right where we left off, like we did in book 10. And they eventually decide that it's time, because they find out that Darius is half Vampanese. He has very small amounts of Vampanese blood in him, but he has been blooded, of course, by his father. Darius is also now starting to question a lot of the things that his father had, the information that his father had fed him. Obviously he wanted to twist his mind, use him against Darren. That's the way Steve is. And so they decide that some of them are going to go back to the Cirque du Freak, and the Darren, Vansha, Alice, Ivana, Darren and Shankos, they're going to go to Annie because they have to reveal themselves because he's been blooded. And so that's what happens. They go back, she doesn't believe it, but eventually she comes around to it, and that is when they reveal that, of course, Darius is a half Vampanese, but there is a way to save him, and that is to reblood him as a vampire, to make him a half vampire. Because we also learned that Darius is 10 years old, and that's where we get the line that Darius is a little bit younger than he was when Darren was, when he was blooded by Mr. Crepsley. And so we also learned in book 11 that Darren is going through the purge again. The final stage is once he's finished with this purge, he will become a full vampire. But that things do not work out that way. So yes, Darius is successfully blooded as a vampire. He is sent away, and that is literally the last we hear of him. Even towards the end of the book, we do not get to hear what happens to him. We do not know if he's made his way to Vampire Mountain to be trained by someone like by Venise or by Vansha himself. We just do not know. It's left ambiguous. So it turns out that there's a showdown at the Cirque du Freak. There's a big hanging galley built where Shankus's body is. But eventually there's a big massive brawl and stuff. RV escapes because he's after Steve killed Shankus, he's not about that. He doesn't like that. His old eco warrior ways are starting to kick back in, and eventually time stops because of course Mr. Tiny is there. He's been there since Mr. Tall's death. The same with Ivana. And so time stops. No one pays attention to Darren, Vansha, Gannon, or Steve. And so they make they go running, and then they have their fabled final clash, where eventually the battle goes it could go either way. But eventually Vansha gets stabbed through the chest by his brother. Now, whilst Ganon is the protector of Steve, he is not. He is not bound by the rules of Mr. Tiny. So if Vansha died through Ganon's blade, then victory is handed to the vampires. So he's trying to get Steve to kill Darren beforehand. But Ganon gets knocked out because of RV. He's the one who knocks him out, and then Steve kills RV. And that is the end of RV, Reggie Veggie, or Righteous Rampanies. And so then Darren and Steve have their fatal brawl. In the end, Darren is the one who stabs Steve. And that is when it's really revealed that Mr. Tiny is the one who's done all of this. He's the one who orchestrated the Lord of the Shadows. He's the one who orchestrated both of Darren and Steve's conception. He's the one who manipulated with that. He done it in the bounds that he could not release the monsters of, if he were to break any of the temporal laws or the laws of the universe. Because he saw that how close humanity were going to be getting, the same with the vampires and the vampanese. So he orchestrated this. So if Darren won, he would then, he'd be so filled with hatred that it just not would be enough. He'd wipe out all the vampanese, he'd wipe out all of the vampires, and he'd then wipe out all of humanity and rule for several hundred years under the tutelage of Mr. Tiny, with Mr. Tiny being in his ear, not necessarily telling him what to do, but pointing him in the right direction. Once that's revealed, Darren is not like that, but then he realizes that Steve, if he moves a bit, Steve will have a perfect opening to stab at his stomach some more. And so Darren, thinking quickly once the idea has formed, starts whispering into Steve, because he's starting to repent a bit, realizing that, it wasn't Darren's fault for being rejected by Mr. Krebsy for becoming a vampire and stuff like that. But then Darren decides to torment him on that, and so Steve kills him, and so both of them fall into the river and both die, therefore robbing Mr. Tiny of his of the Lord of Shadows. So Darren does not go to paradise. He doesn't get the luxuries of that. He is bound into the Lake of Souls. And so he goes from going insane to being sane, insane. The cycle repeats. He's trying to live within his memories of when he was a kid prior to going to the Circuit Freak. But the moment those memories click in, he's forced to relive his entire life again. And that continues to happen until Lady Ivana pulls him from the Lake of Souls. Because Darren, foiled their father's plans, Mr. Tiny's plans. So Lady Ivana has been jumped forward by several millennia, where now only the dragons rule the earth. Everyone else is either dead or has maybe gone out to the stars. It depends. It's not really explained. And so she informs him that it's been 2 years for her since then. The war scars still rage on, but Harka, Vansha, and Ganon are trying to iron out a peace treaty. And Mr. Tiny could have pulled Darren out from the Lake of Souls at any point, but he wanted to let him suffer some for ruining his plans. He could have easily gone back in time, and changed a few things, so that way there still could be a Lord of the Shadows that he wants. But then he also tried to pester Lady Ivana to have children, because remember, she can have a child of a vampire or vampanese. She's the only one able to do that, because normally the vampires, male and female vampires, are sterile. They cannot have children. So she ponders on it a bit and then realizes, oh, I'm going to take keys from Darren here, because she was very upset when Mr. Tiny revealed his secrets. And so she decides to take a page from Darren's book and defy her father. And so she goes and says that she's pregnant. Doesn't say who the father is, just that it's it could be a vampire, it could be a vampanese. And so Mr. Tiny is so excited that he sends Ivana to, because he's going to make Darren into a little person, to travel back to the fabled incident at the Cirque du Freak, to remove Darren from that, because if you remove someone, a key person, from the equation, the universe will autocorrect that by creating somebody new to fill that place. So if you kill Hitler, before his rise to prominence, the universe will create someone who could be 10 times worse, you know. And so that's why Darren's soul will be freed from the grasp of the Lake of Souls and can fly off to paradise. And so Lady Ivana reveals to Darren who the father of of her child is. Rather, twins. It's both Vansha and Ganon. So her way of sticking it to her father is to have someone who is 1/4 vampire, 1/4 Vampanese, and 1/4 sorceress. And she's going to use that to reunite the clans. She's going to use her children because they'll be able to age rather quickly, and her children will be able to um, breed with the vampires and the Vampanese as well as she can. And so that's going to create a brand new race of Nightwalkers. And yeah, so as I said, Darren goes, he frees himself from the Lake of Souls after becoming a little person and traveling back in time. He gets starstruck seeing Larkin Crapsley again because it's been a while since he's seen him. But obviously he can't talk because he wasn't given a tongue. And so that's how the book series ended. I love this series. You know, I think I made it pretty evident with these book reviews just how much I love this series, because over the past 15 years I have read through them multiple times. And I love it every single time. I love going back through Darren's journey through these 12 books, from being afraid to accept being a vampire, to being forced to drink blood for the first time at the end of the second book, to then learning of the Vampanese in the third book, going off to Vampire Mountain and interacting with other vampires, because the only two vampires Darren had met at that point was, you know, Mr. Crepsley, the vampire who blooded him, but also Gavner Pearl briefly in the third book. And he got to meet everybody. He got to meet the princes. He got to meet, Kurda, who he became friends with. He also got to meet Seba, Venise, Era, all of those. And he went through a lot of trials and tribulations. You know, the failing of the trials of initiation, to Kurda's betrayal, to being disdained for the vampires' need for, enjoyment from fighting. He just didn't get that. He still thinks, in a sense, what Kurta thinks, that they should have sat down and should have talked to the Vampanese. They should have figured out why they were here before coming down guns a-blazing. Not really guns a-blazing, because the vampires do not like that, but you know what I mean. To becoming a vampire prince, to then go spend several years hunting, because it kind of, I just realized that there's kind of like a bit of a continuity issue there, because but I'm not too sure if it is one, because he was told, the hunters were told that they have a year to for the 4 encounters. So I'm not sure if the 4th encounter was going to be saved for, because we get told in book 3 that book 11 that there's a 2-year time skip from the events of the Lake of Souls to that one. So because they were told that if they don't kill the Lord of the Vampanese in those 12 months, that's it. The war was the Vampanese. So I'm not sure if that was like a bit of a continuity issue or not. But hey, I still love it. And especially now that I'm essentially at the end of my time with this series, by finishing off the Saga of Larkin Crepsley. These books hold such a special place in my heart. As I said in the first book review that I'd done for this early on this year, that if it wasn't for Tunnels of Blood, I don't think I would have found my love of reading. I don't think I would have been as good of a reader as I am now. Because as I said, I was heavily dyspraxic back then, which I wasn't aware of until a couple of years later when I finally got diagnosed in 2014. But these books hold so much, so much to me. They just mean so much to me. That's why as soon as um Darren Shan had announced, because I've been keeping my eye out, that he was going to have an event in Chapters in Dublin, the bookstore Chapters on the 17th. That I was made sure to that if there was tickets available, I was buying it no matter what the price, because that's how much I love these books, and they mean so much to me. It's why every time I go to get back into the itch of reading, I reread everything. I reread the Saga of Darren Shan, Larkin Crapsley, Zombie, the Demonada, as well. Whenever he comes up with a new young adult series, I read it, because I love them all that much. They all mean something to me from different aspects of my life. As I mentioned for Allies of the Night, it meant a lot to me reading that as someone who's just going into secondary school. To read Darren do that, and because I remember thinking to myself, I wonder if my uh, secondary school experience is going to be something similar. With the way the way the teenagers talk in this book, am I going to have to deal with the same thing? So like I said, they all mean a lot to me at different points in my life, and I love coming back to rereading them because they're just so important to me. But yeah, that is the Saga of Darren Shan reviewed, all 12 books. Whether or not I review the Saga of London Crapsley, I will figure that out as soon as I finish Brothers to the Death, because there's a lot to cover, so I do not know if I'm going to have to split it into two videos and cover the first two books and then cover the second two books. So I just don't know, but you'll obviously know in September, if I do it, because again, that's how fast I'm reading these, that I'm just like, oh yeah, once I finish Birth of a Killer, that's not Birth of a Killer, Brothers to the Death, that's the 22nd book that I've read this year out of 50. So yeah, there is a lot. I might end up doing it, or I might end up picking up a different series to review. I don't know yet. But that is going to wrap this up. As again, I said, I do not know what is next because I'm pre-recording this so far in advance. So thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. And I'll catch you all on the next upload.